I would start with £1 a spin, maybe have a couple of wins, and then I'd feel like I was gambling with their money, so I would stake up, or I would start losing and then I'd bet more to try and win it back. So I can burn through £1,000 in a few minutes, and that's what was happening.
They tried to redefine responsible gambling as safer gambling, which was meaningless. It's the second abuse, really, isn't it? You've lost the first time, and then the onus is then thrust upon you as the person who is irresponsible.
It's stigmatizing. Problem gambling in the population is going up every year. Every time there's a new survey, it's going up.
Today's guests are Matt and Jack, the co-founders of Gamban. And before we dive into their stories of gambling harm and talking about what gambling looks like in the United States right now compared to England, I have just one favor to ask from you. There's so many of you that watch this channel all the time, but haven't yet hit that subscribe button. If you do me the favor of subscribing to the channel, then my promise to you in return is that we'll continue to work hard each and every day to spread the message that gambling addiction is real, but so are the resources out there to get better. You were talking about roulette machines that you were able to spin 3 times per minute.
Mm-hmm.
Did you talk about the stake limits, what it was before?
Yeah, it was £100 every spin.
And then with the slot machines that you were doing, we don't have to dive into the amounts, but I know that on stake specifically, there's slots that you can spin $1,000 a spin. Plus.
I've seen slots where you can spend $15,000 a spin. Pounds, so that's more like $20,000 a spin.
So when we're looking at these massive amounts of money that you can lose in such a short amount of time, what is the future of this? Are stake limits going to come around, or is it just going to keep going and going and going until everyone goes broke?
I think stake limits are the single most effective policy intervention for reducing harm associated with the product. Because if you can limit de facto someone's loss rate per hour, maximum loss rate, then you're limiting the harm, the financial harm, and you're also making it less easy for that person to try to chase losses by staking up. The problem I had was I would start with £1 a spin, or I would start with a few pounds a spin, like as I started gambling more and more, and then I would maybe have a couple of wins, and then I'd feel like I was gambling with their money, so I would stake up. I'd get desensitized to the higher stakes, or I would start losing and then I'd bet more to try and win it back. So you end up, when you've got a staking capacity of like £1 up to £100 or £1 up to £15,000 or whatever, inevitably in that session you will stake up, and you could do so rapidly. And then, but towards the end I was betting the maximum. I'd bet £100. And that was to try to chase, or to, because I felt like I was gambling with their money or whatever. And then the potential to lose significant amounts in such a short space of time is astronomical, right? And you can get into huge amounts of trouble. Like if I'm losing £300 and potentially £300 a minute, then I can burn through £1,000 in a few minutes. That's like that, and that's what was happening.
I think what I'm wanting to get at is, like, with the improvement of the games themselves, as the design becomes more addictive, faster, higher bet limits, like the idea of who is hitting rock bottom as a gambling addict, as a problem gambler, is changing. Because it used to be like, the dad in his mid 40s, early 50s, who has been gambling for 15 years, that's now tapped out with the bookie, had the big loss. Like now it's like a 22-year-old who's been gambling for 3 years is hitting rock bottom, where they've stolen, lied, committed crimes to gamble. Is it only going to be that the people struggling with gambling are going to get younger?
I think everyone finds their level of what I've always called self-disgust. For me, my tolerance for loss did increase, and it increased to, I want to say, about £300. So in dollars, that's 500 roughly, maybe a bit less. But that for me was like the amount that if I lost, I just felt sick. And only twice I've gone above that, to around about 1,000. And I think people, regardless of stage or age or product, will find the amount that they just can't afford to lose any more than, and either that's just a kind of like an intrinsic, infelt, like it's in line with their sort of financial beliefs. It's represented by the equivalent to what I could have bought if I didn't gamble.
So I didn't like losing any amount.
Right.
I didn't feel comfortable with losing any amount, and that was like what made me
even
really
like
compelled to
£10.
chase. Yeah, I'd feel like that was
interesting.
Not like that was so that made me more inclined to chase losses.
Right.
But the point you made is interesting, because I think in the past we would have had people betting on racing or sporting events, and they would have had several transactions a day, right? They would be waiting for the next race or whatever, the next betting opportunity in like, I'm talking like 20, 30 years ago. Whereas now you can have 7 transactions in 20 seconds. So the rate at which you can gamble, the amount of betting events that you can participate in has increased exponentially to the point where if you are 22 years old, you may have had more betting experiences, more bets transacted than a person who was 50 addicted to gambling 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So this is the thing that's changed the most, is people are hitting rock bottom younger, because I think the nature of gambling products has changed. It's become much more rapid, much more accessible. And so in response to that, the solution, I think, is to make those products much less harmful, to have less capacity for harm, slow them down, limit the stakes, make them less accessible, impose more regulations, duty of care on operators that have the privilege of offering online gambling on people's phones, right? It's a privilege. It's a license to print money.
Yeah.
You're offering, I think Les Burnell from Stop Predatory Gambling, they said this is a form of financial fraud. I mean, like, it's not language I would necessarily use myself, but he's got a point, right? You're basically marketing something as if it's a possibility that you can win money, and the whole sector is based on a deception.
If you're trying to quit gambling, one of the hardest parts is the isolation. That's why I actually wanted to share a new community that Gamban has helped to create alongside the esports team called Ecstatic. It's actually a Discord hub where people experiencing gambling harm can talk, share their stories, find resources, and even attend events with experts and people in recovery. If you want to check it out, I'll actually put the link in the description of this video, because recovery gets a whole lot easier when you realize that you're not doing it alone.
It's based on that whole deception that it's possible to win when we know that isn't true.
Right. I think there's like a good metaphor for what gambling is today versus 30 years ago, and it was in this speech that I used to listen to like every day on repeat, and it was from like the late 60s, early 70s, right when like television and movies were really coming in, and they said that people who had a TV in the early 70s they would view more violence than anyone in history within just a couple of weeks, just watching movies on TV. And so if you think about that, that's including all the people who are in wars. I mean, not that, they're going through the same traumatic events and stuff, but just witnessing by volume, like death and gore and violence, they would see more watching it on their TV than everyone in human history would in their entire life.
Well, this applies to other sort of adjacencies, doesn't it? This applies to porn. We know very well that young people are exposed to a huge amount more than you would be without access to porn. And that's kind of led to what we understand to be, young men don't know how to treat women, and like I think there's probably an expectation on both sides that and I think with gambling and with in your case where you talked about violence, I think we've become quite desensitized to the cartoonish nature of violence almost on TV.
Yeah.
But I guess there is a sort of jaded thing, and again with like short form content and shorts and things, I think our attention is a lot shorter and requires much more. This is probably going to help people hit rock bottom faster because we just need more and more and more, and we're on this kind of hedonic treadmill. And gambling is an almighty powerful stimulus. So
how do we rectify that though? Because I think that a lot of 21 and 22-year-olds would think, I'm too young to have a gambling addiction. I'm too young to have hit rock bottom. Like my dad had a problem, my uncle had a problem, but he stopped when he was 60. Like why am I going to stop at 22?
I think of making the products a bit more like controlled is I think your word was to make them boring. Is one solution. I think if we keep hiding behind this kind of idea that like if we do anything in the regulated sector, the black market is going to provide an alternative. Well, I don't think that.
I don't think that is a credible thing to say. Like, you're never going to compete with the black market on regulation and tax if they don't pay any tax and they're not regulated, right? So you've got some of these crypto casinos, they're offering 100% return to player games, right? If they are operated the way they say they're operated. There's no regulated operator that's going to offer that. You have to enforce against these operators, these crypto casinos. You have to make sure that they're not accessible. You have to make sure they're not hosted by local servers, and the payment processes aren't supporting them, or the people behind them are held to account, the jurisdictions harbouring those entities or whatever. There's lots of things they need to be doing to crack down on illegal gambling. But this idea that we have to now accept this race to the bottom, it's extremely dangerous. Like, where you just kind of say, well, there's nothing we can do. We have to just basically be as permissive as possible to tackle this. And then you're just going to end up with black market style gambling everywhere, right? That's the problem, unless you do something about it and enforce against it. The amount or the opportunities to gamble have no bearing on the level of gambling harm, the level of problem gambling. Problem gambling is always constant in the population, and the purpose of the regulated industry is to educate and inform people. So when people realise they've got a gambling problem, they can stop, or they can set limits, or they can find treatment, or whatever. That was the whole basis of it. But that really runs completely contrary to the evidence base and to what we know now, which is that gambling products and their accessibility have a direct bearing on the level of gambling-related harm in the population. And so the practices of the industry are causing or exacerbating gambling harm, and therefore need to be regulated properly. And I think the problem with responsible gambling, not just that kind of paradigm, which places the onus on the individual to kind of take responsibility, quote unquote, for their gambling, and take responsibility for the fact that they might get addicted. But it's also I think almost impossible for the gambling industry unilaterally, for any one gambling operator, to do anything that's going to reduce gambling harm, because they will put themselves at a commercial disadvantage to their competitors. So you need regulation. There's no way through. There's no responsible operator that's going to emerge and say, we're going to do things differently and be a trailblazer, and everyone then copies that. The only way to level the playing field is through regulation.
I saw a great example of this actually firsthand in, I want to say 2017, I think. And it was it's like one of these world regulatory briefing events, and you've got two gambling operators there, and they're both on stage, and they're both ranked as most hated advertiser for, I guess there was some poll that was going around. And they're both sitting there, and they're both very keen to reduce their amount of advertising, not just to cut the budget of their ad budget, but they'd done their research and worked out that, I forget exactly what the percentages are, but if they can cut down by 60%, it wouldn't affect their profits at all. It wouldn't affect their gambling yield. So they're both sitting there, and both, I think they even said, we're not price fixing here. So there was a kind of knowing thing that they both wanted to reduce, but they both couldn't, because they were saying that if we reduce, we open up this void for others to advertise. And it just seemed very sensible that this is where regulation would come in, that this is where you would have maybe ad limits, because no one benefits.
So basically, you're saying that they were just advertising because they didn't want anyone else to become a competitor? They just had to fill the slots?
Yeah, basically. They didn't want to be advertising their brand, because the more they were advertising, the more hated they were, because they're coming up on screen all the time.
It's costing them money. And if you're in particularly in this market where you've got betting shops and you've got lots of brands that have been around forever and they're visible on the high street and everything like that, and advertising curbs would not really impact those brands, because people, if they want to gamble, they will know about them already. The advertising curbs really they impact the longer tail, the new entrants into the market, which can be the most unscrupulous operators, because they're trying to grow their business and they want to get acquired and all that kind of stuff, and they have less to devote to compliance, and it's just basically what you end up with is larger operators spending loads on advertising with diminishing returns, to shut out competitors. If you had an advertising ban, you may reduce overall consumption of gambling, but it wouldn't necessarily impact the larger operators as much as it would the challenger brands. So you kind of end up with, it's a very weird situation, but you're right. That's a prime example of where if you're a regulator or a government, you could say, well, we'll just have this, we'll just ban it, or we'll just curtail it significantly. You wouldn't come up against a huge amount of resistance from the larger gambling operators, but they don't do it, which is kind of frustrating really from a public health perspective. But then there's other things like financial risk checks or stake limits or whatever it is, like, that can level the playing field. The idea that the gambling industry can self-police and, you know, can say, we want people to gamble responsibly and we're giving people the opportunity to do that and, you know, set their own limits and all that kind of stuff. And for that to be sufficient, it's evident, it's self-evidently not the case. You know, they're still deriving significant proportion of their revenue from people with gambling problems. Problem gambling in the population is going up every year. Every time there's a new survey, it's going up. All of this stuff is not working. This approach, this general approach to kind of hoping that the industry will self-police is not worked. And I think what we need in this country is a new gambling act which recognises this as a public health issue. It's not like any other leisure activity or entertainment product. It's actually something that people can get addicted to, and it's a commercial model that relies on that. So responsible gambling for me is PR. It's basically the industry saying to government, or with government being complicit, saying to the public, we've got this under control, and kind of giving people false confidence or, like, I don't know, a false sense of security that they are operating responsibly.
And I remember when they sort of repositioned, or they tried to redefine responsible gambling as safer gambling, which was meaningless. But it's sort of like it's the second abuse, really, isn't it? You've lost the first time, and then the onus is then thrust upon you as the person who is irresponsible.
It's your problem. You have the
It's
problem.
your problem.
Yeah, that's the thing as well. Like, it's stigmatizing. It's so, like, because if you've been addicted to gambling and then you're told in the industry-funded treatment providers and whatever, industry-funded gambling harm awareness messaging, that it's your responsibility that you've got addicted, it's all your fault, it's extremely stigmatizing. And then they'll say, oh, why is there such a stigma associated with gambling addiction? Well, because you're placing all the onus on the individual. And of course, like, as individuals, we've had to, and yourself, take responsibility for our recovery. But the idea that we were the only thing with agency in what brought about that addiction is ridiculous, right? There's lots of things that could have been done differently that would have maybe prevented the level of harm that we experienced. So it's extremely stigmatizing. And in the worst cases, I think that's what contributes to people taking their own lives. I mean, that's actually that's come through in some of the inquests that Gambling with Lives has supported, which is a charity that operates here in the UK, which is supporting families bereaved by gambling suicide. Is this whole narrative about responsible gambling that says you are the problem, makes people believe it, that they are the problem, and they internalize that. And then, as I say, like, I think it's so much better to try to educate people as to why they may have got addicted to something, you know, and you don't have to do it once they've been addicted to it. You can say, this is an addictive product. You can be very upfront with the messaging, like the awareness messaging. This is how people get addicted to it. If you do get addicted to it, it's by design. It's not because there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, we don't have that. We actually have quite the opposite. There's nothing that implies that you could even lose money, let alone be addicted to gambling. So on our commercials, it just says, hey, loser costs if you have a problem. I've seen, finance commercials that say, like, hey, if you invest in this ETF of the S&P 500, where at worst you're going to lose 5% of your money in a year, that says that you could lose your entire principal. But, DraftKings and FanDuel can say that it's the number one feeling in the world to gamble, and it's only a problem if you lose.
It's similar here. The financial sector is obviously regulated differently. So if you want to invest in a crowdfunding campaign, let's say £10, you would have to prove yourself a sophisticated investor, whereas to gamble with thousands of pounds, there's nothing.
Yeah, it's just a disconnect.
Yeah, it is, and it's incredibly infuriating. I think having seen this over the last decade, to see these gambling operators effectively sort of coming out as your friends and saying that, like, when the fun stops, stop, take time to think. We've seen some gambling operators. I know there's one that offer therapy directly. I mean, they don't literally offer it themselves, but they provide access to free therapy, and you just think this is
It's kind of weird, isn't it? Like, what other sector where you come and enjoy our really fun product. You may or may not require therapy after. Like, it's kind of weird, right?
But
Like,
they don't have to disclaim that either. That's still stop when the fun stops.
we always try and draw parallels between smoking and drinking, but I don't think you can with gambling.
Smoke responsibly.
I mean, that is, but you see, I think that was the case, wasn't it? It was they did do that for a bit. They did wait.
It's toasted as well. Yeah, they tried that.
They try, and the filters.
Yeah.
Oh, if you get the filters, that's fine. They're healthy cigarettes if you've got the filter. There's all that kind of stuff. They tried. They did try it. I mean, tobacco is a brilliant case study, actually, of like the kind of longitudinal, like, components of, like, harmful consumption advertising, and where I think gambling will end up. Like, gambling's going through all the stages that tobacco went through. I'm not saying gambling is as harmful as tobacco, whatever, right? But, like, I am saying that they use very, very similar tactics, and the gambling lobby uses basically the same tactics as the gambling industry. It's all about the individual, denying that it causes harm, denying that it causes addiction, trying to extricate the product from the addiction, right? Like, basically saying we've got these gambling addicts, I don't know what we're going to do with them. Well, you created them, right? It's like, oh, we've got these people addicted to nicotine. No, I don't know why. Nicotine's not addictive. That's basically what they used to say, right? It's like people who've got addicted to nicotine, it's because there's something wrong with them. And then it was denying the link with lung cancer, and then it was, all of these things, like denying the link between the harm and the cause of the harm, and if you deny that link, and you do so in an effective way, then you stop the logical conclusion of that, which is, let's regulate the cause of the harm. And that's kind of where it is in the US now, right? And obviously the US is a very different environment because of the First Amendment, where you can't, there's lots of freedom of speech, and there's no restrictions on that. It's very difficult to it's very difficult really to kind of curtail advertising. But I think with tobacco, that was like a special case, right?
Well, I mean, I think with First Amendment stuff, it's like broadly applicable, but there's still exceptions within advertising. Like most, like I think Red Bull has gotten sued for saying it gives you wings, right? Because like someone's like, I didn't get any wings from the Red Bull. But interestingly, in the U.S., there's only one entity that's exempt from any kind of truth in advertising law, and it's state lotteries. So I think that precedent carries over to the casinos pretty much, because they're like, well, if the lotteries aren't like really, if this law is not applicable to lotteries, why would it really apply to FanDuel and DraftKings? And who regulates them? No one. They regulate themselves. So the lottery could say that they give you wings and you can't sue them.
And the states have a vested interest with the lotteries, right? Because they rely on that, I imagine, the revenue from that. So that's that's interesting. I suppose it's one of the things I know that Harry Levant and others have looked at, which I think is interesting, is the wagering requirements or the playthrough requirements on the bonuses, which are extremely misleading. And I spoke obviously earlier about the VIP programs, which has been sort of superimposed from the UK context into the US now. Now they've been sort of basically regulated out of existence in the UK. But the playthrough requirements are crazy. Like, if you're saying that you're getting a free bet, a free bonus, or whatever it is, and you've got to wager that 99 times, the equity value of that is basically zero. You can't wait, and you've got to wager it on slots with a 8% house advantage.
In my experience, I found that those bonus requirements towards the end of my gambling activity, I found that I would actually turn those down. Someone I was speaking with about this said that you need an academic degree to work out how these bonus requirements work. And actually, I found on one occasion they set the bet limit automatically to £7.50, I think, so about $10 a spin. But that was like the default. And I pressed spin. But in the terms and conditions, it was max $2 or £2 a spin. So before I'd even started, I'd voided the bonus. At that point, anything that I played was absolutely pointless. Anything I win was absolutely academic because I pressed the button. So if and I tried to make this point, the only way that I could end up getting any sort of recourse here was to go through affiliate sites that offer like dispute resolution to try and shame them into paying out. But isn't that interesting? That's like the second gamble. First of all, it's are you going to win? Probably not. But if you do, are you going to get paid out?
Yeah. I mean, have you seen much of those in the US, like the playthrough and like the
A
wager?
lot of those are located on like the online books that aren't technically legal or illegal. We see a few of them with like playthrough on casino side on the sportsbook apps, but in most states we don't have online casino yet. In most states, it's only the online sports betting. So when it comes to the sports betting, the playthrough is like bet it once usually.
Bet it once.
But
Oh, that's not too bad.
but they had a problem with
Not endorsement.
they had a problem with the labeling of it because they called it the no sweat bet. And our
Right,
friend Matt
okay,
Litt,
that's bad.
who's going to be our lawyer, he's the one that's kind of taken the charge against that. And they basically were asserting with the language of the bet that like you could not possibly lose your money, but it was like a double sweat bet because if you lost, then you had to then bet with the free bet to try to get the money back that you put in initially.
Have you seen Bet Now Pay Later?
Oh, is that out? Yeah. I made a video and it was like, this is what I think gambling is going to look like in 2035. And I called it the pay in 4 parlay. And I didn't know that existed already. So I beat it by, it beat me by 9
scary,
years,
isn't
I guess. It's interesting because I mean, I haven't gambled in 3 years, so I haven't done the prediction markets either. But when the Trump election happened the last time around, like, I didn't watch the news to find out if he was winning the count. I watched my Robinhood app, which was linked. I don't know if they were partnered with Kalshi at the time or if they offered their own prediction market, but it was like you could see in the odds who was winning in real time. And so we see that now integrated with like CNN. And I think financial markets have always been a better determinant of like what's going to happen than someone's opinion.
Is it that real time? Is it that?
It is that
sort of-
real time.
yeah.
But like if you look
It
at
was
like
even like
DraftKings,
the Venezuela invasion, right?
yeah, that's a whole different mess. That's
So like
insider.
someone inside, you get insider, kind of encourages insider trading.
Yeah.
Because they want to know what's going to happen. So they don't care about that. They don't they protect the market makers or whatever. They just someone put a massive bet on the date that Maduro was captured.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think that actually, I don't know if they even paid that out in the end because I think they said that it didn't count as an invasion because it was a kidnapping or something. But anyway, it was like,
Who makes these judgment calls?
this is another
who
thing.
knows?
This is another thing. So CFTC is not equipped to do that, right? So that's it. It's not like it's a futures exchange. It's not like a gambling regulator.
Yeah.
So the thing I think is a complete mess. But like, there's no way that they're gonna be curtailed. So you have legitimate gambling opportunities, betting opportunities in every state. In California is like the big one, right? That all of the sports betting lobby want California more than anything, and they keep getting kicked back because of the tribes and other reasons. And then Kalshi and Polymarket just sort of go in and say, well, we're a futures contract, and so we can just be here legally.
I think one thing that they're doing as well that's kind of going to give them more time to operate before any real consequences is they're offering like really extreme bets, like a death pool or like an invasion, like things that like you would feel ethically strange about gambling on. And so my guess is that this is what's going to happen. They're going to be like, listen, we can't have you guys offering bets on deaths or bets on invasions, bets on army, like this kind of thing, while the whole time they're offering bets on literally everything else. And they're like, okay, you know what? You're right. We shouldn't have gambling on this. And while that's happening, they're profiting all of the things that aren't as extreme. And no one's saying, like, we need to get rid of them. We just need to get rid of these extreme bets.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the problem. It's not that they exist. It's that, we don't want someone getting assassinated because someone put a bet on Kalshi.
Is that likely that the event sort of follows the bet?
Yeah, well, it could
is that
do.
happening?
It absolutely could do. If there's the liquidity on there, where you could get paid out for doing it, or like there was one I think on the date that the fires would stop in the Palisades, like in California, and it's like, well, if you've bet on a date that's like a month in the future, you've got an incentive to like keep the fires going. Like, it's kind of like, it's quite sick. But Rob's right. Like, the presence of those almost creates a space that makes the sports betting look quite legitimate when it isn't really.
So
I
are
mean,
we
it's-
looking through a lens for sort of world events that just don't quite look right? I mean, I think you sent one the other day of someone leaving at 64 minutes and 95 seconds.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a bet like whether or not they'd stay
Yeah.
for
The
65.
White House briefing, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That was very obvious, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, imagine that there's a bet like who's the next big name celebrity from America to die. All of a sudden, you know, if you pick so and so,
Yeah.
does that mean that you buy a gun and shoot them?
Is it
and
not
you
just
deal with it?
yes or no? Like,
Yeah. So, I mean, like, say if a celebrity was in intensive care and it was like, will this person die before the December 31st?
Yeah.
Like that kind of death pool, right? Like that.
Yeah.
And then someone might have an incentive to go and, you know, unplug the machine or whatever, you know? I mean, that's kind of where we're headed. It's quite dystopian. But they see themselves as part of, first of all, as part of Robinhood, right? As part of, like, as being a financial product, which vindicates our decision as Gamban to block Robinhood, not just because it was frictionless trading, but now they've just conflated that platform entirely, really, with sports betting, right? And it's like basically a gambling product.
I mean, Matt, before you go on that topic, if you look at Robinhood on, let's say, Monday at trading hours, like New York Stock Exchange trading hours, it looks like a trading platform. Like, it looks legit. Market closes, prediction market pops to the top of the page, followed by the crypto market.
Yeah.
Then you have like the sports book side of it. So you have the yes nos. Then you have like I guess it's yes nos, but it's set up like FanDuel and DraftKings, and that's all from like 4 to midnight. Then it rolls back the futures markets, so it's like a stock exchange again. But to your point, great decision to block it because it's both a trading platform and a casino at the
that's
same
very
time.
clever, though.
Changes by the hour.
Yeah, it's I've taken lots of people that want to make good financial decisions and invest their money and cross-promoted them into the most harmful speculative activity, which is going to potentially cost them all their money, which is, I think, completely immoral.
And we're seeing so many services. I think even the platform that we use for payroll, for paying staff, and you can choose to have your salary in Bitcoin and crypto. So like Revolut obviously use crypto and things as like an alternative payment method. So the insidious nature of a lot of these things is also quite difficult for us in terms of like what to block and how to block it.
Yeah, I would imagine crypto is particularly difficult because there is a legitimate case to be made that you can invest long term with crypto. It's like doing Forex. If you believe that it's a possible currency in the future, then you're just doing foreign exchange. But then you also one deposit away from every sports book, one deposit away from Robinhood, which is more calling it a sports book. I don't know if Kalshi and Polymarket take crypto, but I'd be shocked if they didn't. Then there's the actual crypto-based ones that are located in Europe. They use a VPN. So yeah, it's very difficult with crypto because people always ask, "Is crypto gambling?" And I mean, what are your opinions?
I'd say someone with a gambling addiction should not engage with it because it's too volatile. And I think one of the things we're looking at the moment is, can we be, given our position and our user base, should we be recommending certain platforms that are, you know, much less risky, where people can put their money if they've got money and they're not gambling, right? Because I think there's a real issue with potentially, you know, you block gambling and then you end up on platforms that promote, like Robinhood, that promote like derivative forms of gambling, or trading platforms that promote leverage, like trading with leverage or whatever it is. That's just not good, like not, you know, conducive to like investing or like good habits. And I think we've got to think a bit carefully about, like, maybe we can work with some platforms to encourage people to use those platforms, not like end up on Binance or something, or like, you know what I mean, like end up on Trading 212 or like buying Bitcoin. I just think it's a really dangerous thing for someone with a gambling addiction to do, because you end up obsessively tracking the price of it. You end up trying to chase losses. You end up, it just becomes a new form of gambling addiction for someone who is already addicted, in my view.
I completely agree with that. I think if you live somewhere like Ecuador, where I believe it's a currency in play, where the state currency has sort of fallen apart, and there is a viable reason to use crypto, whatever. I think Bitcoin is what they use. I mean, I speak as someone who's lost 2 wallets and the password credentials for MetaMask or whatever. So I'd say my gamble I take with this is whether or not I'll still have access to it, because if you lose your password, you lose your codes or whatever, you've lost it all. But I think that there's 2 sort of approaches with crypto, probably more than 2, but as far as I'm concerned, I believe in the concept of crypto, and I believe in sort of what it stands for, decentralized. I believe in no sort of government interference or bank interference, so I can understand that. But when we talk about gambling, certainly I know sort of where I go with crypto, which is I'm looking at what they call the shit coins. I'm looking at the things that could go like 1,000 times up, and what's going to be the next one, and I'm investing in a coin with a dog on it, and all this sort of stuff. And I think if
you might have done all right with Doge.
Has it done? Don't tell me that. Has it done all right? Look, this is the point.
This is the point.
I feel like if I haven't lost my stuff and it hasn't gone massively up, either it goes up and I'm not in it, in which case I feel like a horrendous case of FOMO, or it's gone down, in which case I'm probably going to go on tilt. And I still think I've got some Luna kicking about if I can find the codes. I don't know what that went from
0.01 cent maybe.
Great, because I think it went from like 80-90 pounds down to in a day.
They got rug pulled. So that's the other thing, right? So all kind of, there's loads of like scams as well. Like I just think if you're in recovery, just steer clear of all that.
Yeah.
Just you want a simple, like, no stress, no cortisol.
Yeah.
Just don't get involved in all that.
I'd go a step further and say if possible, if you've got like a someone else doing the work for you, like the investing. This is why having a broker or someone. It's probably, I know you
That's
may
it.
pay a
Like,
fee.
if you've got like a pension or you've got an ISA, like a savings account or 501, what do you call it? 401k in America. Like, just get someone to manage that, invest on your behalf. Just be more than arm's length away from all those decisions. Like, that's my advice.
Well, the interesting, like from a financial point of view, that may not be the best advice because you're paying fees where
Sure.
you wouldn't. But from a recognizing sort of that sort of gravitation towards volatility
In the long
risk
run,
taking,
it's better for you.
I think so.
I still struggle with the 401k stuff. Like Shreya would tell you, I was able to stop completely with options. Options was a tough one for me.
Yeah.
But now I can do mental gymnastics, and I can say, oh, it's not options. So it's okay if I buy this stock or this stock. And while that could, be held for a long time and be a good investment in the end, it's still like checking it constantly, seeing the updates, and you're just playing with fire.
You should just buy ETFs. I think that's the. I mean, this is not financial advice, and I've got to be careful. Obviously, I'm not giving financial advice. I'm talking about gambling addicts in recovery. The thing that's not going to trigger you and make you feel like you're gambling again is buying ETFs or like getting someone to manage your portfolio, like whatever. Like, don't make those decisions because exactly you'll just be checking it and you'll be because really at the heart of it, any stocks you buy is like it's be a long-term investment, right? But at the heart of it, there's always that bit of doubt: have I made the right decision? And you want to have that positive reinforcement, and you want to like be validated about the thing that you've bought. Whereas if you buy a fund, that's going to, you see that probably will go up in the long term, probably. I mean, it might not, but very, very likely it will. And that's going to be diversified, and that's going to be less risky, and it's going to be boring. And that's what you need.
Yeah, boring is good.
Do boring stuff, really boring things.
Gary Stevenson was talking about what trading actually looks like, and it does look boring if it's done properly. The idea of sort of coming back and checking on the stock and seeing if it's done well is
The more boring, the better.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. If you're getting a little thrill or a little bit of anxiety or stress or whatever, then I think you're doing the wrong thing.
But I think young men particularly need to feel like they're. I'm sorry if it's sexist. I think that young. Certainly, I can identify as someone who's kind of come from the idea of it has to be difficult in order to, you've got to have the eye, you've got to pick. The reality is Vanguard, S&P 500, and just wait. That's it. And it's so
consistently dollar cost averaging over a long time, putting that in, and then it will compound over time, and then at the end of like the decade, you'll have way more than you had when you started.
But
I'm
also,
fighting off a yawn right now as you guys are talking.
well, good, but there are people whose job it is to study one particular stock, and this is what Gary was saying, and I thought this was really interesting. You have no edge at all over any stock if you are not completely full time and working for a fund or like a company who have the resources and access to give you in order to continue studying that particular thing, and they just spend all their life on one. Like the edge that they have over you is incredible. So yeah, these ETFs are the way, and I think if that's one thing younger people can take away, it's important to save money, and it's important that your money is safe. That's the way to do it. And I think if you what's the Einstein saying was, there are two types of people who understand compound interest: those who earn it and those who don't understand. I've completely butchered that, but the point is, learn about compound interest and compound growth, and that's what good money management looks like.
Well, you give a good segue there with the word having an edge, or the phrase having an edge. A lot of young men, if we're going to stay on the topic, think that sports betting is investing, or it's a skill-based game, or they have some kind of edge. And what I find often is I'll see comments to the extent of, I'm positive EV betting. I use a model. I have this spreadsheet. What TikTok commenter would have a spreadsheet model good enough to beat $1 billion sportsbook?
Yeah.
Do you run into that as like a big mental barrier for a lot of people before they will stop with the sports betting?
It's like roulette systems, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think the most compelling argument I can make to people is that if they do get an edge, they'll be blocked. Like that's the thing. Like, so with casino products, you can't get an edge. There's a mathematical house advantage that means that you will never win in the long term. But with sports betting, if you do start to win, they will restrict you. Like that, and that is their prerogative. And so really, I mean, Jason Robbins has been quite clear on this. Like he said, people shouldn't gamble with DraftKings. He's the CEO of DraftKings. People shouldn't gamble with DraftKings if they want to win. That's not what we're in the business of. Words to that effect. That's not a direct quote. So from their perspective, they're selling quote unquote entertainment. It's not a way to make money, but the way that's marketed, or the way people perceive the industry, is way much, it's much more like as if it's a way to make money.
I mean, one of the ads that pissed me off the most that I've ever seen, and it's the one that I always cite as the example, and it's not that the other companies don't do it, because they do, but it's FanDuel. And they had this set of ads. It was like the number one feeling. And it would be like a situation, it would be like breaking up with a toxic ex or something like that, feeling number 427. And then it would say at the end, but it doesn't compare to feeling number 1, which is winning on FanDuel.
It's probably not wrong though. I mean, I've got to say there are highlights in my life, but it's a different, like winning, it hits in a different way to, I think like that sort of pleasure response is so, and this is I think the reason why we get drawn to gambling. It's artificial, but it's very reliable. You know that when you lose, how you're gonna feel if you've done it enough, and if you hit it, it's and this is the thing. Like people always say, it's not a gambling problem if you're winning. It is a really difficult thing to break up with a gambling problem, because you almost have to time it. If you're at a loss, your possible inclination is that you're trying to chase and get back to where you were. If you're winning, why would you stop? And so there's this kind of...
But that's the thing, even when you win, like if I remember when I used to win, I would just walk out of the shop and I'd think, I can't wait to go back. Almost immediately.
Yeah.
I was like, it would the euphoria of winning and walking out a winner would last for like 10 minutes, and then I'd think, I really want to go back.
So did you get stake money rather than winnings?
Basically, yeah. I mean, but that's, I think, what everyone gets.
Yeah.
Unless
definitely.
they stop forever.
Yeah, I always say
So
that
that's
all wins are future losses.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Thank you. I came up with it myself.
I learned something as well from the Canadians. They had when I was in Vancouver, they had this kind of booth set up in a casino, and they had this kind of concept of a win limit. And I'd never heard of this before. Have you come across this? Okay, I guess for anyone who is still gambling, this would have helped me anyway. Like, you have a loss limit. Potentially, like, you go in with $100 and you say, this is how much I'm going to lose, or this is how much I'm going to play with. And if you lose it, you walk. What I never understood was the idea of like when can you leave? And what they were telling me is, and I thought this was quite an interesting strategy, is if you, let's say you set a win limit of 500, you can still continue playing if you exceed 500, but you leave with 500. So you've set yourself like a kind of stop loss on 0, a loss, and 500, a win, but you can carry on playing. Say if you've got $700, you've got that 200 buffer to play with. See, my problem was always that it was never enough, and I don't know if in practice that would help, but I thought that was just an interesting concept.
You can hear in the way that you described it that it's well intentioned.
Yeah.
Like, let's set a limit. But to me, like, those are the words that I used when I was trading stocks, right? And so it's the implication again that this is a financial gain or financial loss to be had instead of entertainment.
Yeah, good point.
The tools don't align with what they say they're selling. The tools are financial risk management tools, but if it's entertainment, there should be no need for risk management.
Yeah.
And whenever I open my mouth to speak, I'm thinking of slots, by the way. I mean, like,
sure.
like prediction is something that I think I'm yet to fully understand, and skins only the tip of the iceberg. But slots, Matt, we talk about how, like, with the way you gambled was quite different from the way I gambled, right? I think I came at it from like a meditative escape sort of thing, and you're more sort of like adrenaline.
Yeah, which I think is kind of, I think it's interesting in the sense that, like, I'd say your mind is like, you're quite, I don't know, you've got more energy than me, right? And you're like, I think you needed just like something to slow you down, whereas I need something to like perk me up,
Right?
which I think is kind of like a weird. The roulette I think played at 3 spins a minute on these machines I was addicted to. That was really quite compelling and adrenaline fueled, like anxiety, cortisol, everything, right? I was like just super engaged with that, whereas you were like in the zone.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is like what, there's a book called Addiction by Design by someone called Natasha Dow-Schul. She's an anthropologist. It's a very, very good book, and she talks about how like slot machines are designed to get you in the zone,
in the flow,
and then you forget everything that's going on, and then you get addicted to that feeling.
but it's just pressing a button.
But it's just like,
And people don't understand that. That's the thing.
It looks really, really boring if you're not the one playing.
Right? Yeah.
I guess there's people that watch the streamers, but the streamers, you're not really watching for their button pushing. You're watching for them to freak out if they win or they lose.
There's so many of them now, isn't there?
Oh yeah, tons. And
I started like watching some gambling content on Instagram, and I just get served loads of like streamers and like illegal casino streamers. And it's like this Plinko game.
Oh yeah,
just
that's
like,
everywhere.
It's unbelievable. Like, and I don't know what kind of deals they've got with the companies. I imagine they're making a huge amount of money from promoting it.
I actually interviewed a guy who was like a lower tiered streamer, so he was just off of having like a deal with the casinos. But he said that to get those deals where you would get paid $20,000 or $30,000 a month, like a base salary to stream, plus keeping a percentage of whatever you won, plus keeping a percentage of your referral. To get to that point, you had to basically prove to them that you had no morals. You had to basically say, all right, look, this is how many viewers I have. This is what I've been funneling to my code thus far. This is worth your investment. You're going to get an ROI by sponsoring me. Because what they do when they sponsor them is they up their balances. They make the numbers bigger so the audience gets bigger so that they can keep converting at the same rate that they were converting before at a bigger number. But basically he was saying that like you would be developing as the streamer like a gambling addiction and another addiction to like, I cannot stop streaming or else I will lose my job. And so it's like, it's this double dependency loop on continuing. And it's hard to feel sympathy at the higher numbers, right? Like when they're getting $100 million a year to be a casino streamer, you're like, all right, I don't feel bad at all. But when it's like they're fighting and clawing to try to get to that initial deal, you can see that it's building. Their ideal streamer is a gambling addict.
Well,
I would have
like,
been an ideal streamer.
Some of these streamers look broken.
Yeah.
I mean, like you can tell. I'm not sure, but Rothstein, I think, is one of them. XQC Trainwrecks. Just he talks about, just don't gamble. And yet, I mean, they're probably at that sort of. I don't know how many hundreds, if they've broken that sort of level, but
he owns Kick. He owns half of Kick.
Oh, okay.
And so right. Kick is owned by Stake, and Stake is the biggest casino entity in the world. So when he says don't gamble, he's not, take it with a grain of salt. So we will have a foundation rolling out in the United States called the Gambling Truth Project. It'll be linked in the description of this video. What are your hopes for what we can accomplish with that? Because at its core, what we're setting out to do is addressing a couple of concerns. The first is this intense advertising that we see. What can we do about it? How can we make things better? And then, having gambling addiction be recognized for what it actually is, an addiction, because a lot of insurance providers in America don't pay for treatment. So don't know quite how we're going to tackle that issue, but what do you two hope that we can accomplish through the work that we're going to do?
Oh, I think it's really brilliant what you're doing. I'm really hoping that there needs to be a counterweight in terms of the narratives that the industry's putting forward. I think it's really important. I think Truth Project is really apt because what's needed is exposing the true nature of the industry, the industry's real commercial model, how addictive some of these products can be. I think there's so much scope for, like, obviously with yourself and the others that are involved with content creation and like reaching as many people as possible. And I think for me, particularly in a US context, the most important thing is people are making informed decisions about whether to participate in this thing and to participate in, gambling at all. And I don't think they're getting the full picture. And I suppose in terms of timing, it's quite, it's quite well timed what you're doing now, because I think people are starting to realise in the US, like, this is probably not what we thought it was, but it's still very early on in that, I'd say, trajectory of people recognising that this sector is quite harmful and like has a lot of problems associated with it, and that kind of like feeling of, like we have here, where like everyone knows someone who has either been addicted or who has experienced some degree of harm or been like screwed over by an operator or whatever, or they've experienced that harm themselves. I don't think it's quite there in the US yet at that saturation point, still in that sort of growth phase. But to have that set up and to try to, I think, have an objective of constraining consumption, like to sort of suppress consumption in some way, to sort of say, like, encouraging people to think twice about whether they do that with the full information.
Sure.
Yeah, I think a counterbalance for sure. I mean, I've got really high hopes for the Gambling Truth Project. I think, if done correctly, I'm not saying that we're going to need people to start our cars and taste our soup, but I do think there's a huge amount of disruption that needs to take place. Maybe I'm being a little bit too ambitious here, but I see primetime advertising that competes with the gambling industry, that allows people to check in on and be aware of the problems up front. I see earlier signposting for help, because that's part of the truth. I see assistance in seeing what the abyss looks like before people hit rock bottom, and I see the industry being challenged in ways that are both direct and both coming from seasoned lobbyists, but also a kind of, I think counterbalance is a really good message. And I think there's loads of campaign ideas, loads of as a charity, as a non-profit, being able to bring in money that is then used to offset some harm. I think this is like you. I think we don't quite know what this is yet, but I know that the right people are involved in it, and I know that it will be like a magnet to other amazing people in delivering the truth.
Yeah, and needs to be independent of the industry as well, which is, I think, is the key thing.
Yeah.
Industry gets its claws into everything, and it becomes very, moderate and RG washing, I think they call it.
That's been my talking point lately. Has been like, if you call 1-800-GAMBLER, you would have no idea that they're gambling neutral when you call. But then when you find out like what they say to you, what they're allowed to say to you, where they're allowed to point you, it's like you can just sense something's missing. But 99% of the public would never make the assumption that that could be funded by the gambling industry. It just doesn't make sense.
I think that's another thing as well, that when you're dealing with large organizations and charities particularly, the kind of the help side, can often be so abstracted from the problems that we have talked directly about today, with the sports and the slots and the roulette and the casino. I know certainly from my experience, if I'm dealing with organisations on the treatment side, sometimes months can go by we've not even talked about gambling, and it beggars belief. But the truth of the matter is we are so wrapped up in the lingo, in just broad strokes, sort of, public health talk, and actually when you do bring up sort of casino and slots and you talk about the actual mechanisms in there that are driving people to continue, and they're kind of like the real problems, the ones that we have experienced,
the commercial determinants of harm, basically, which is what the industry don't want to talk about, because they're not, it makes them part of the problem.
Right.
kind of get glazed looks because they don't understand. And I'm not saying that everyone who works in this space has to have lived experience. Clearly that's not the case. There are some great people, but I think that the Gambling Truth Project is a way for particularly that visceral first-hand experience to shine, to be given the light.
I feel like I always have to say, like, oh, I think there's lots of great people that work at these organizations, and I still think that, but it's a shame that I even have to say that, because I feel bad calling out the broken system for being broken because of the nice people that I've met that work in the broken system. But it's just, it's a messed up situation.
It is.
That's what we had here for ages. We had a system that was funded by voluntary contributions from the operators.
Yeah.
And there were some very good people in the system that did their best. We were part of it, But the reality is, you don't want that conflict of interest. You don't want to be beholden to or at risk of losing funding if you say something that's true. All of the organisations that perhaps have felt like they had to walk a tightrope between helping people and placating the donors, they're liberated from that. That's the system that you want, really. You want services to be funded independent of industry.
Do you think the existing framework can right itself, or do you think it needs like a sort of total reset?
I think the problem is funding mechanisms. I think I'd like to see, in the US, I'd like to see that there be some kind of federal responsibility. There's something called the GRIT Act, which I think would work very well, where you take 50% of the federal sports betting excise duty and you allocate that for services. And I think that people involved with delivering gambling addiction, recovery, support, whatever, I don't think that they should be in a position where they have to rely on voluntary donations from the gambling operators.
Absolutely. Well, last time I checked, we could have a whip round now, take out our wallets and cover Texas's gambling harm spend. I think it was just non-existent. They would argue that, well, it's covered off by the lottery and there is no gambling. But the reality that we have found, certainly with Gamban, is we get a hell of a lot of customers from states where gambling is illegal.
Yeah, when we were in Texas, our friend Isaac pulled out his phone and made a bet on a prediction market. Oh, I thought the guy that was the Texas regulator was going to explode when he saw that happen.
You can believe it.
He was like, "You just did that. That was illegal."
We always say home is where the server is. I think now with VPNs, you just got to treat the world as one place.
Yeah. So if you're in the audience and you want to hear another story of someone in recovery from a gambling addiction, check out this video next. And let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.